Good day everybody, hope you're having a wonderful day, and today we're going to be talking about the flute. Yes, one of the foremost woodwind instruments, one of the first ones I've talked about so far, and an extremely important instrument in orchestral and solo context, to say the least. First, we're going to break down its anatomy, which is fairly basic, at least the understanding of its anatomy that I possess, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it produces sound, and then we'll go on to talk about its tone quality, its position, the orchestra, and its repertoire. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, the flute, it looks something like this. Now the flute is, of course, the Indians have the bansuri. I'm Indian, why am I saying the Indians? But you usually think of a wooden thing with holes in it, or the recorder or whatever. But the flute, the concert flute, the one in Western music, the one that everyone writes for in classical music, is this. It's made from silver, or sometimes gold, or sometimes they settle for other metals as well. But yeah, usually silver and or gold. And it is about this long, and you hold it up to your mouth, and it's one of the first wind instruments that we've talked about today. What I mean by that is you produce sound not by vibrating a string or by hitting a drum. No, you blow into the instrument, and that actually creates a sound, and that's why it's one of the woodwind instruments. Now it's classified as a woodwind instrument, even though it's not made out of wood, because the original flute, the Baroque flute, and flutes before that were made out of wood. So that's why it's classified as a woodwind instrument, and it also has a it blends with the woodwinds very well. So it is a woodwind instrument nonetheless. Okay, that being said, let's talk a little bit about its anatomy. So the flute is actually made up of two joints. Right now it's in its connected form, but right about here it breaks off, and you have the top joint and the bottom joint. Some call it the head joint and the foot joint, whatever language you wish to use. And it breaks off like that, just for easy storage, and you connect it back together. The foot joint has all the keys in it, and the head joint is, or the top joint is where the lip plate and the hole for your mouth is also located. Now, then of course here on the foot joint we have all the keys necessary to produce all the different pitches, and that's really about it for the flute's anatomy. It's not that intricate. I mean, the keys are intricate, but then I mentioned them as one component. So now let's come to how the flute creates sound. Well, of course, you create sound by blowing into the flute. That is probably not disputed. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that. But the reason when you blow a specific way into this hole, you are able to create the sound vibrates in a certain way, and you're able to create sound. Like if I just blow, it doesn't make any sound. But when you blow in this hole, it's designed in such a way when you blow sort of vertically onto it like this, and you blow, it vibrates enough to create a proper sound, and that kind of sound. Now, unlike other wind instruments, which either use a mouthpiece or a reed to produce a sound, right? The flute actually uses neither, and it's just the engineering that's allowed it to happen. In fact, even I'm not too sure. But regardless, a sound is created when you blow into it the correct way, and flows through the flute and exits out that hole. And here's where you need to pay attention. So, how do the keys produce different sounds? Well, the basis upon which all instruments work is that if you make air, right, which is producing a sound most likely, if you make air go through a small space, it's going to give you a high sound. And if you make air go through a long space before leaving the instrument, it's going to produce low sound. So once again, if you make air go through a small length of tubing before it exits the instrument, you're going to produce a high sound. And if you make air go through a long length of tubing in the instrument, you're going to produce a low sound. And you can see that as you get, for example, you go to trumpet, it's a short instrument, you require more tubing for a French horn because it's low, you need even more tubing for a trombone, you require even more tubing for a tuba. So yeah, this is a very simple concept, and this is the basis upon which this works. So when you don't press any keys, the sound is exiting through the keys, in fact. So if you blow in from here, and the sound exits through the keys, usually the first few keys, and that's it. Sound exits from those keys and does not come out from this. So you can actually, if the flautist plays and doesn't do anything, you can actually cover this hole, and it's not going to make a difference, because that's the principle under which the flute works. But basically, by playing these keys, right, by pressing these keys, what you end up doing is that you are increasing and or decreasing the amount of distance the air has to travel. So here has to travel this much. If you press some combination of keys, it will have to travel this much. You have to press all the keys at the same time. It'll travel the entire thing and exit there. So that by manipulating the length at which the air is exiting, you are manipulating the pitch. Point is just pressing the keys will change the pitch. That's a long story short of it. And yeah, that's all I really have for the anatomy. As I said, it's very simple and it also produces sound in a fairly simple way. Okay, moving on. Let's one more thing to mention. Let's talk about the flute in general now. Okay, this is a soprano instrument that means it plays in the higher ranges. So it plays higher ranges, and it's the highest instrument in terms of pitch of the woodwind section. So it's the soprano of the woodwind section. But according to that, even though it is a soprano, it has an incredible range. So you can play very high and also kind of low on the flute as well. So it can go quite low and quite high. But it's primarily a soprano. That means it plays in the high register. Okay, great to know. It's also, in many regards, the leader of the woodwind section. That's kind of a controversial opinion, but this is how I feel like the violin is the leader of the string section. That's actually a fact. I feel the flute is sort of the leader of the woodwind section in many cases. And that's just because it's just a soprano and it usually takes the burden of whatever the woodwind section is doing in a certain point in the orchestra. The sound that the flute produces is very very beautiful. You think the flute is capable of much virtuosity. You can get very complicated, very difficult, very intricate sounds, but at its base, flute is very beautiful sound, very mellow sound, very very deep sound. Well, high but deep sound. It's very difficult to put into words describing the tone quality, but it's got a very, very rich and sort of mellow and beautiful tone to it. It's very, very strong, soft as well, nice soft texture to the sound it produces. So that's the way I would describe the way the flute, how the flute sounds. And it's also a very melodically suited instrument. That means that the way it produces sound, the tone is quite suited to melody. So instead of being like double bass is not suited to melody, its sound is too low and gravelly. It's very suited to melody. That means its sound is light, and it's mellow, and it's also beautiful mellow melodies. This is very good at playing those. Okay, now enough about the flute. Let's go into its role in the orchestra and in its ensembles. Alright. So as I was saying, the flute's main role. Let's talk about the flute's role in the orchestra. So as I was saying, the flute is the leader of the woodwind section. So just like the violin sort of leads the string section, so soprano and carries the melody. Same with the flute, but for the woodwind section. So flute is the leader of the woodwind section. That's kind of controversial, but I don't think so. I think if you're calling the violin the leader of the string section, you could very much call the flute the leader of the woodwind section, and it also carries the melody of the woodwind section. And now coming to how it works in orchestra, the flute, as I said, the voice of the flute, the tone of the flute is very mellow, it's very beautiful, it's very sustained. I don't know what other words to use to describe it, but it's soft, it's mellow, that kind of tone, right? And that's characteristic of the woodwind section in general. And what you will find is that it's either supporting the string section and the orchestra by adding color to the whatever's in the foreground, right? By staying in the background, either accompanying it with harmony or adding a different accompaniment melody. So the main melody is the melody accompanying the melody and adding its own tones and making the music much more colorful. So basically, it can either play a supporting role or it can sometimes take up the solo. So often at times, the composer will have the woodwind section come in and take the main melody. Like you look at you look at maybe Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, where they suddenly start sharing the melody. So you've got, when you want very soft, mellow, sort of sustained, beautiful melodies like what is there in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. What you see is that the flute and all the woodwind instruments come in around then, and they contribute, and suddenly they take over the melody. And when the woodwind section takes over the melody, the flute is head of the charge. So my long story short, right, the flute can sometimes accompany the other instruments in orchestra and add color and beauty to the music while remaining in the background, or it can sometimes take its own forward and either play a solo, it's kind of weird to say, but yeah, or lead the woodwind section and become very prominent place in the orchestra. So point is, it is a very important instrument, whether it's an accompanying role or a solo role. That's an orchestra. Now coming to woodwind ensembles, there's not really that many of mention, right? Woodwind ensembles There's not really very strict structure for it. You don't find that much music for them either. But when there is one, the flute is pretty much usually the leader of the woodwind ensemble, just like the violin is the leader of the string quartet. And then for solo repertoire, the flute has quite a bit. So the flute has sonatas, concertos, and a bunch of other solo repertoire. And even just regular tunes, the flute has a bunch of tunes associated with it. But it's not really a form like sonata, concerto, but it is still a tune, right? And a flute has a bunch of those. So point is, the solo repertoire of flute is not lacking. It's quite present, and there's a lot of solo repertoire for the flute. As I said, the flute is it's a really nice instrument. It's mellow. It's sustained. It's all these things, and all of other instruments aren't. So yeah, I really like the flute personally. But that being said, from my side, I would like to thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you took something valuable away from it. Hopefully you learned something interesting. And it is me wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you very much for watching, and join next time when we're talking about another orchestral instrument. Bye.